All right, we're starting a new unit, and it's on cell structure and cell transport. And this first PowerPoint is a brief one that kind of introduces you to cells. It's not necessarily, it's not one of our learning targets, but our main learning targets that you'll be assessed on. But it is an introduction to kind of give you a little bit of background information regarding cells. So some of the previous understandings that we're hoping you remember from 7th grade life science, which if you don't, since it's been a while, that's why we're reviewing it right now. But we want students to be able to state the 3 parts of the cell theory, and then we want you to be able to compare and contrast the 2 categories of cells. So first of all, when we talk about the cell theory, we just want you to know that there are many scientists who contributed to the cell theory. As we learned more about cells through more powerful microscopes, once those were started to be developed, we were able to see cells a little bit more clearly and learn a little bit more about them. But the reason we want you to make sure you remember the cell theory is that it is a unifying concept of biology. And the 5 gentlemen pictured here on your PowerPoint are 5 individuals that all made a contribution in some way to the cell theory or the discovery of cells. Now, Robert Hooke, he was the first to identify cells and actually give them the name cells. He was actually looking at cork cell, and that's like it would be dead plant cell, and all he was seeing was the cell wall, and the little circles kind of in spaces he saw kind of looked like little cells. Leeuwenhoek, he was a microscope maker, and so he helped with the improvement of microscopes. He was able to see many more different organisms, and he started to make some nice little drawings of them and actually document what he was seeing under the microscope. Schleiden was the first to do research on plant cells and really look at what a plant cell looks like, and he concluded that plants are made of cells. Didn't matter what type of plants he was looking at, they all had cells in them. Schwann, on the other hand, he was looking more at animals more than plants, and so he concluded that all animal cells also were made of cells. And then Furco, he proposed the idea that all cells have to come from other cells. So kind of combining all of what these people contributed, especially Schleiden, Schwann, and Virchow, we came up with our cell theory. And the 3 main parts of the cell theory are that all organisms are composed of cells, all existing cells are produced by other living cells. In other words, cells can only come from other cells, and that the cell is the most basic unit of life. Like, in order to be considered a living thing, you have to have at least 1 cell. All right? Most organisms are multicellular, but you have to at least have a cell because that is the most basic unit of life. So when we talk about the 2 categories of cells, that was kind of the other learning target or previous understanding we wanted you to know, is that we can break cells down into 2 broad categories. They could either be eukaryotes, and eu means true, and karyot means nucleus. Okay? So eukaryotes, true nucleus, they have a nucleus. You can see that big structure right here. They also have membrane-bound organelles. So they'll have things like mitochondria and other structures that are surrounded by a membrane. These include your plants, animals, fungi, protists. The other category is a prokaryote. A prokaryote, pro means before, and again, karyote means nucleus, so before a nucleus. So these organisms, what makes them set apart is they do not have a nucleus. They also do not have any membrane-bound organelles. So they won't have things like mitochondria in them. And you can see here, one of the main groups is the bacteria. Everything else up here is a eukaryote, but bacteria are the only prokaryotes. And you can see there's not a lot of stuff inside here. Now, they still have genetic material, it's just that it's kind of organized it's not into a nice, neat little nucleus. It's just kind of a little bit more, doesn't have that membrane-bound structure around it. So if we were to do a little bit of matching now with this and try to decide which category goes where, if we have membrane-bound organelles, remember those are eukaryotes. I can't write very neatly with these pens. If they're single-celled, well, although most, some eukaryotes could be single-celled, all prokaryotes are single-celled because bacteria are the only prokaryotes and all of them are single-celled. So we put that descriptor in the prokaryote side. No nucleus, remember that's what prokaryote means before a nucleus, so no nucleus here in the prokaryote side. Tree, cat, mushroom, hopefully you picked over here, the eukaryotes. Has a nucleus, that would be a nucleus, that would be a eukaryote, true nucleus. E. coli bacteria, remember bacteria are the only prokaryotes, so E. coli would go over here. No membrane-bound organelles. And single-celled or multicellular. So it could be one or the other. Whereas over here, prokaryotes are only single-celled. So just make sure you know characteristics of both of those to help distinguish between the two. And then do you remember the three parts of the cell theory? All organisms are made of cells. All cells come from pre-existing cells. And we'll talk about cell division in a later unit, but all cells have to come from already existing cells. And the cell is the most basic unit of life. Okay. So a lot of times we don't consider viruses a true living thing. And why do you think so? Based on what you know about the cell theory, why aren't viruses considered true living things? Well, if you look up here, they aren't made of cells. They're not made of cells. And that's what kind of makes, now we kind of think of them as an acellular, meaning they aren't made of cells. We sometimes think of them as an acellular parasite because they actually have to get into a host cell, such as your cells, like this COVID virus. It has to get into your cells before it can actually replicate and make more of itself. That's how viruses work, is they kind of take over the host cell and make the host cell help produce more of them. But they are not made of cells, which is a lot of times why we don't think of them as being true living things, even though they can cause a lot of harm. And they do still have genetic material, and they still can replicate. They have to be in another organism's cell before they can do that. Okay? So this is just a little introduction to cells.